After 16 years, the amount of misinformation, some intentional, some just misguided, around podcast promotion continues to grow. Now, before you spend any money or effort promoting your podcast, make sure your house is in order. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Listen, I turn down work at least 2 or 3 times a month. At least 2 or 3 times a month, people, podcasters, reach out to me in one form or another and say, will you help me promote and or market my podcast? Happens all of the time. Well, as I said, several times a month. And I always turn those jobs down. I turn those jobs down because I know, flat out know, that in order to make a podcast successful, you need to get some basic elements done first before you go start a big promotional effort. Promotional efforts are really good at giving you good numbers as far as engagement and as far as clicks and impressions and all that, but none of it actually often results into what you want, which is more people listening to your show. So I tell those people, when I say no, I just don't say no. I always tell them, look, you need to do these 3 things. This is my approach to promoting and marketing podcasts. And I only do this in conjunction with the other services that my firm offers. But I don't do it as a one-off because before we do any sort of marketing dollars, we got to get these things nailed down first. Ready? Break out your pens and papers. Go to the website where I list these things out in detail. This is one time you're going to want to look at the episode details, either in your app for some information or on the full web page for another. There's a link inside of your app, whatever you're using to listen to that should have a link to get more details. That's where you're going to want to go because this is dense stuff. Ready? Here we go. Number 1, you got to have the foundational fundamentals nailed down. You gotta have these 4 things inside of these 3 things. There's one thing 1, but there's 4 parts to thing 1. Part 1 of thing 1 is a web presence. And that means a real website. That does not mean an automatically generated website that comes straight from your RSS feed. Your RSS feed is designed to distribute your podcast episodes to directories and apps, not a website. Yeah, there's some very pretty ones. They look nice. They don't work. They don't do the things you need them to do. It's not enough information. You need a solid web presence. You need that so that you get discovery. You know that thing we're always harping about, podcasters? The best place for discovery, search-based discovery, is through search engines, which requires a website. You really have to do it. Take it from me. I'll have a case study to share on this where I am the subject probably next month. All right? Number 2, out of that web presence fundamentals is, the other thing it's good for is conversions. When somebody finds out about a show, you want to send them to a website so they can actually do something. But make sure it's optimized for conversions. You know how many websites I go to where I can't listen, let alone subscribe? It's hard. Go look at your website. Is it easy for somebody, once they've discovered you, to actually become a listener? That's part 1 of thing 1. Part 2, distribution. You got to make sure your distribution is nailed down. That means your RSS feed, that thing that's not powering your website, that's sending your show out to all the directories. Yes, Apple Podcast. Yes, Google Podcast. Yes, Spotify. But also about 15 other places where you should be able to submit your show. You want to make sure that your show is everywhere people are listening. And I'm stunned there aren't more shows in Spotify or Spreaker, or some of the other apps that are out there. Make sure you're distributed everywhere. Part 3 of thing 1, listenability. This is back to foundational fundamentals again. Listenability. Is your show listenable? Does it encourage people to keep listening? It's all about the quality, yes. It's all about the quality, yes. Does it sound good? Is it worthy of them listening to it? Thing number 4, part 4 of thing number 1, is make sure this is all a repeatable process. Can you do this week after week or month after month or whatever your time frame is? Can you do it? Can you keep going? Because if you can't, if you find that it takes a lot of work to build that website or money, it takes a lot of work to make shows that are actually listenable, then that's going to be hard for you to keep going. Is it a repeatable process? That's one thing, foundational fundamentals. Thing two, you got to make remarkable content. You have to make remarkable content. Advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable. If the content you make, which you've already made sure was listenable, if it's not something that is remarkable, if it's just that sounded good, but it didn't really do anything for me, it really wasn't a remarkable thing, then people aren't going to remark about it. Make remarkable content. Make the kind of content that makes people say, wow, I had no idea this information was out there. That's what you're looking for, not just another voice. Thing number 3, leverage your network. Before you go outside of your network to try and bring people in, you've got to talk to the people who you already talk to. Leverage your network. Once you've got the foundational fundamentals done, once you've got remarkable content done, leverage your network. What if you don't have a network, you say to me? You probably do. You probably have a network, you're just not thinking about that network. Where do you engage with people who are not your friends and family, just regular engagement? Who are you talking to? What groups do you have access to on a regular basis? And if you don't have that, if you really, really, truly, honestly don't have a network, 2 things. 1, start building one now. I don't mean inside of podcasting. I mean start building a network outside with whatever it is that you do. Maybe you start writing publications for someone else. Maybe you start putting out a newsletter that starts grabbing and gathering information. Maybe you reach out and network with events, once we can go to events once again, or other people who need to hear expertise. Build that network first. And if all else fails and you can't build your network, then you go borrow one. Don't pay to be on one yet. Borrow someone else's network. That means getting good guests, if in fact you're going to have guests. Or that means you being a guest, getting out there, your name and the things that you do to somebody else's network. Somehow networking and interfacing with people who can help elevate your show because people might want to listen to your content. You have to do all 3 of those things before you spend a dime marketing your podcast. And here's the cool thing. If you do all 3 of these things really well, foundational fundamentals all done, you're making remarkable content, and you're working inside of an existing network, here's the secret. You probably won't need to spend any money on podcast advertising. Yeah, because you're doing things the right way out of the gate. Now, while you ponder doing that, because you got nothing else to do, right? Except, watch your kids and hope things don't go down. But nonetheless, in those magical free time that you might actually have, I want your lockdown stories. I still want to share these with the people who listen to podcast pontifications like yourself. So please sit down, record me a minute or 2 of audio, put it on Dropbox, and then send the link to evo@podcastlaunch.pro, and I'll share it out with the world. And before I go, tell one friend. I know you'll have to do it remotely now, and that's fine. Please tell one friend about podcast pontifications. Really, really means a lot when you personally reach out to someone and say, hey, you should listen to podcast pontifications. I mean, it's great when you retweet me and you share my content on Facebook and all those things. Wonderful, but nothing beats an individual outreach to one person. You to them, saying them something they should listen to. That really works really well. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast pontifications. Cheers.